Okay, well, welcome everyone to this very short webinar about trading as a charity. As ever, it's a sort of quick gallop through some of the issues, and it probably won't answer all of your questions, but actually maybe it'll help you answer, ask the right questions. And of course, you know, I'm here afterwards or next coming weeks to answer any specific things that you've got. But this should hopefully give you a good idea about the criteria about what you can do as a charity in terms of training. So if you don't know CAN, so we're the local infrastructure organisation supporting voluntary community action throughout BCP, but also delivering some advice and support to groups in Dorset Council area as well. And our aim is to empower the voluntary sector, enable volunteering and connect communities. And we're membership based. Quite a lot of our services are open to everyone, but the full offer is only open to members, which I think most of you are on this webinar. Membership is free, so if you're not a member, then have a think and look at our website for signing up so that you get the full offer of being a member. So that's me. Quite a lot of you know me, so I do most of the one-to-one advice and support on setting up and running voluntary and community organisations in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. My colleague Avril should be on this call today. She does a similar role to me in the Dorset Council area, but she's got laptop problems. So if you are operating in Dorset, then your first port of call is her. If not, then it's me. So you've got my contact details if you want to follow up after this short webinar. I'm going to gallop through this. If you've got questions, there's a Q&A session at the end. So either make a note of it and ask it later or try and put it into the chat. Okay, if you're happy using that facility. Okay, so trading as a charity. Well, can charities trade? Well, quick bit of interaction here. I'm going to set up a little question, and it's single choice, so it's anonymous. So don't get worried about me seeing what you've answered. So if you could quickly just answer that. Okay, so you can see that, can't you? So everyone says yes. So why have you bothered to come on this webinar? I asked myself. But we'll crack on because yes, but as long as you follow the rules. So basically charities can trade, and there are two things you have to check. One is that your governing document allows it. Governing document is that generic term used by lawyers and the Charity Commission for the document that actually sets out how your organisation operates. So it could be your constitution, or it could be your articles of association if you're like a charitable company. If you happen to be something else, it might be called rules, for instance. So you have to check that first, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the webinar. But much more importantly, it's about if it's within charity and tax law. So there are rules that you have to follow, and I'm going to sort of chunter through some of those. And you know, charities trading is nothing new. You think of village halls that have been around for a couple hundred years. They basically trade. They basically sell meeting space. Perhaps a bit newer have been things like childcare organisations, play groups, and then nurseries that have been run by charities. Basically, you know, you pay to get a space, and then you've got things like luncheon clubs, which have been around an awful long time. Again, people pay to go and have a cheap, nutritious, warm meal, socialise and so on. So it's nothing new in the sector at all. And I say that because it's sort of this idea of social enterprise is a very new term, and it always gives the impression that actually raising money through trading is something new and sparkly. No, it's something that an awful lot of charities have been doing for an awful long time, and in fact has probably been their only source of income. So the concept of social enterprise is nothing new within the sector. Okay, so, but what is trading? So another little poll for you to do. So this is a multiple choice one, so you can tick as many as you like. I think there's one more person to vote. So I'm not forcing you to, but just quickly do that if you want to. Great. Okay. So. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. The first one, everyone's right. Giving a bike to someone for nothing, that will be classed as a donation. Okay. And actually, all the other threes are trade. The important thing about a trade is it's an exchange. So actually, I will give you something in return for you giving me something back. It doesn't have to be money. It has to be something that both parties give some sort of value to. And also, it doesn't have to be at the true cost. You know, we talk about, like in the supermarkets, about lost leaders. Actually, you know, basically they are selling stuff at below cost price, perhaps as a way of getting you in to buy more from them and so on. So actually selling something at a discount less than its actual value is still a trade if there is an exchange. I will only give you this if you give me that. Okay, so I'll stop sharing that. So there has to be this exchange for something, and it doesn't have to be it could be cash or in kind, in the expectation that you'll receive something in return, which may not be valued at the same amount, like subsidized or discounted. So it's important to recognize that there is a trade. And the other thing that usually is related in trade is that you're agreeing a contract between the buyer and the seller, and therefore you have recourse to the law if anything goes wrong. You know, you can go to civil court if basically saying, well, I gave you this, you gave me that, or you didn't give it to me, or you didn't give it in the way I wanted it, or didn't give it to me in the condition that I expected it to be in, then actually people can go to court about it. And although I'm going to talk about charity law and corporation tax in this webinar, if you're selling stuff, there's a whole lot of other plethora of rules and laws you might have to think about, particularly like the consumer rights legislation, but I'm not going to touch on that today. So sometimes it's pretty obvious that there's a trade, okay, that actually you go up to a kiosk, it advertises that, you know, our coffee is going to be £2. I give you £2, you give me a cup. And that's pretty obvious. But actually sometimes it's a bit grey about what is a trade. And unfortunately, quite often it's going to be down to what HMRC decides. And if anyone's ever had any contact with HMRC, they're a bit of a law unto themselves. And it's quite complicated. So for instance, when you get these slides, there'll be a hyperlink to HMRC guidance about what is evidence of trade. And for instance, it's repetitive, right? It's not one-off. It's intended to make a profit, even if it actually makes a loss. It's about your intention. Why are you charging that bit of money? So it gets around the thing around like lost leader, for instance. approach, that actually you're advertising it in some way. And particularly maybe if you are buying items in for resale to be used by the organisation. A bit later, I'm going to talk about one of the really important exemptions about what we trade is obviously the sale of donated goods. So in a charity shop, if you're selling goods that have been donated by somebody, actually HMRC, that's not a trade. But importantly, if you alter those in some way, let's say someone donates you a crappy old chair and you do it up and paint it and sell it on, actually HMRC said that becomes a trade. It's not realizing the value of a donated good. So if you just basically take stuff in, you can sort it, you can clean it, that's fine. And basically that's not a trade. But if you alter it in some way, like repair it even, then actually you could be tripping over into trade. So there is a longer list on the HMRC website. Let's go back to this picture of the tea coffee kiosk, and there are some subtleties that HMRC actually detail as well about what counts as trade or not. So another little interaction. Okay, so again, this is a multiple choice. So let's say you go up to the kiosk and it advertises a cup of tea for those different things: freeze, donation accepted, suggested donation, minimum donation 50p. Tick which one of those you think would count as trade. Okay, that's everyone. Share the results. Okay, yeah, the first one, you know that it's free. That's not trade. Okay. Now, donations accepted. Okay, so two of you felt that that was trade. In fact, it's not, because what's that's saying is that donations are accepted as long as you give them a cup of tea, even if they say nothing. But actually advertising donations accepted, HMRC are happy with that. But as I said, as long as if someone doesn't put a 10p or a 5p in the pot, but still gets their cup of tea, that's fine. Suggested donation, again, HMRC says that is fine, as long again as if they only put in 5p or nothing, but you still give them a cup of tea, that's fine. But actually suggesting to people what to give as a donation is also fine. But minimum donation is not. That's like saying to the buyer, we want at least 50p from you. And we won't give you the tea unless you give us 50p. If you give us 75p or a quid, that's great. But actually we expect to get 50p. And there is an example of this on the HMRC website. And when you get this presentation, there's a link to the HMRC guidance about trading as a charity, which actually gives exactly these examples. But as you're right, it's very clear that if someone says tea 50p, that is a trade. Okay, so, and you need to be very clear whether you are trading or not, because it's then going to be subject to corporation tax and VAT. So I'm going to sort of spend a bit of time talking about these two elements, and they're very important for you as a charity. And sometimes it can get very complicated. So I can give you some initial advice and support about whether something counts as trade or not. But at some points, if it becomes very complicated, you might actually need to get professional advice, usually from something like a qualified accountant. So you can rely upon their professional advice. So corporation tax, so that's the tax on profits and surpluses, and generally charities are exempt from corporation tax. But you have to be aware about the implications it might have in terms of trading. So, you know, the charities don't pay corporation tax on anything that's donated, you know, whether that's money, grants, whether that's in kind, it could be services or it could be goods, as long as it's all used for charitable purposes, okay? And the other thing is, which is great, is actually you can do as much trading as you like if it fulfills its charitable objects. This is called primary purpose trading, okay? So going back to the examples I had earlier, so the village hall. So the village hall's objects are probably about promoting recreational and social benefit through the provision of a village hall. Community centres have something similar. So them selling space to organisations to put on activities for the local population, it helps them directly fulfil their charitable objects. So it's primary purpose trading, and they can do as much of that as they like, and they are not subject to corporation tax. Similarly, if you look at something like a playgroup or a nursery, theirs is probably about providing, you know, care and education to under fives. So basically they can do as much of that again as they like. No problem with corporation tax. And similarly with something like a luncheon club, if it's providing facilities for older people, providing, you know, nutritious meals and social activities, again, they can charge as much as they like, and they won't be subject to corporation tax. They can do as much primary purpose trading as they wish. So non-primary purpose trading is when actually you're trading that's not going to directly help you support your objects. And basically HMRC then sees that as its intention is to raise money for the charity and is therefore liable to tax. So for instance, my example, so a community centre is running day trips to the seaside. Unless the trustees can argue that that helps them supports their objects, this will be non-primary purpose trading. You know, they sell a ticket for 10 quid, even if it's subsidised for 5 quid, then it will be non-primary purpose trading. A childcare charity for under fives, but if it wants to start running a holiday club for 5 to 11s, but their objects don't talk about 5 to 11s, it will be classed as non-primary purpose. And again, an older people's luncheon club putting on meals for low-income families. Again, unless it fits into their objects, and if their objects are to benefit, let's say, over 65s, for instance, then it will be outside their objects, and therefore it'll be classed as non-primary purpose trading. And I've particularly picked those because actually probably all of you will feel, well, those are charitable type activities. They're not trading to actually make a profit and run away with it like a private sector company, but it will be treated as non-primary purpose because it's outside of their objects. And the interesting thing is that most fundraising is non-primary purpose. And sometimes people find that a bit difficult to take on, is that actually, well, we're raising money for our charitable work, but actually most of it is trading. Like you put on a fundraising disco, you charge 10 quid. So basically it's a trade. You can only get in if you give me 10 quid. So it is a trade, but actually it's not directly supporting the objects of the community centre or the childcare charity or the older people's luncheon club. It's raising money to be used by the charity, but will be treated as trading. So that might be a bit of a bummer, mightn't it, for most of you? But as with lots of stuff with HMRC and charities, there are quite a lot of exemptions that you can use. So so as long as all the profits are used for charitable purposes, most fundraising is exempt from corporation tax. And you have to follow the rules. And if you don't know about the fundraising code, great resource. It's basically in one place you can find all the legal and good practice that you need to follow for any sort of fundraising. So for instance, if you do a fundraising disco, as long as you don't do that 15 times in a 12-month period in the same place and raise income of £1,000 at each event, it's exempt. Now, most of you won't do that, but actually there are rules around those sorts of events, those sort of community fundraising events. Similarly, there are rules around, you know, doing challenge events and sponsored events and other stuff. So as long as you follow the rules in the fundraising code, you don't have to worry about any corporation tax implications. As I've already mentioned, sales of donated goods are also exempt. There's this other thing is that if the trade carried out by at least 50% of your beneficiaries is also exempt. So for instance, you might be running a cafe, and if it doesn't directly support your beneficiaries, like let's say it's open to the public and basically you're treating it maybe as a way of raising income for your charity, then actually, as long as maybe the cafe is being staffed by at least half of the people you're set up to support, then you'll be exempt. If, for instance, you were the childcare charity and you were selling Christmas cards, and I have to say HMRC say basically Christmas cards and are all non-primary purpose trading, even if they're produced by a religious organisation. But if, for instance, you were a childcare charity and the charity cards were all being made by the children, then actually you'll be exempt from being classed as non-primary purpose trading. You don't have to worry about it. And the other thing is about if it's ancillary to a charitable activity. So for instance, in your community centre, if you have a little bar, cafe bar, that's only open to people who come in to make use of the facilities and activities, then you don't have to worry. But if actually it's open to the public, i.e. they don't have to attend anything that's being put on in the community centre, then you have to be aware that this will be classed as non-primary purpose trading. So once you've got yourself clear about, is it trading? Is it primary purpose trading or is it non-primary purpose trading? Then actually there's this added benefit of what's called the small trading exemption. So basically all charities are allowed to do some certain amount of non-primary purpose trading, and it's up to these limits. They were increased, I think, about 2 years ago. So basically any charity, any small charity, very small charity can actually bring in up to £8,000 a year of non-primary purpose trading without having to worry about it. As soon as your gross, this is the total, as soon as your gross annual income goes over 32,000, then you can work out 25% of that becomes your limit on non-primary purpose trading. So if your total income is 100,000 a year, 25,000 of that can come from non-primary purpose trading. And then there's an upper limit. So once your total turnover becomes 320,000, the most you can raise through non-primary purpose trading is 80 grand a year. Okay. Just a little table to put to one side. The reason why it's important to recognise, to be careful about corporation tax, is that if you go over any of those limits, then you become subject to corporation tax. And HMRC can be pretty, if they become aware of it, they will go for the maximum, and they might actually start to look at other income that you've raised within your charity. The other thing is the Charity Commission then, if they get involved, might become perturbed that the trustees are not running the charity properly. That actually it will be misconduct, because actually then the charity is undertaking profitable, taxable trading, and that could be a problem for the charity. So you need to keep an eye on those. If you're using a small trading exemption, that you don't trip over, for instance. Sometimes that's why, for instance, all charities, well, no, that's not true. All charitable companies and all CIOs probably every 5 to 7 years might get a corporation tax return from HMRC. So they're basically getting the charity to confirm that it's not carrying out taxable trading. And if you lie by saying, no, that's fine, and then HMRC do come in and do an inspection, then obviously you're going to be hit with an awful lot of fines, and the reputational damage to a charity is going to be pretty high. So you do need to sort of like keep an eye on those limits. So that's corporation tax. Now that's simple compared to VAT. VAT is really complicated, and basically any activity that's deemed as a trade, and that includes if you have a contract. So if you get grants are not subject to VAT, but if you have a contract with like a local authority or the NHS or anyone else, then actually that income becomes vatable income. And basically, if you go to the threshold, which currently is 85,000, hasn't been changed now for 3 years. Again, another sort of tax by stealth by government is that hasn't gone up by inflation. But basically, you need to be aware of whether your tradable income is going to go over that limit or not, because you have to register within a certain amount of time, and again could be fined if you do it too late. And then you have to start adding VAT, currently 20% on any sales. But then obviously the upside is that you can claim VAT back on any purchases made for those vatable supplies. For charities, VAT is really complicated. For a straight business, it's really easy. Usually all their income is vatable, all their outputs are vatable, and therefore they can just, you know, money in, money out, VAT paid, VAT charged, and they can offset them. It's really easy. But for charities, usually they have mixed income and mixed sales, and it becomes really complicated. And probably if you're going to get into VAT issues, you're going to have to really talk to a VAT specialist, and usually a charity VAT specialist. You know, your high street VAT specialist doesn't deal with charities and doesn't understand the complications that charities face come VAT. But to be honest, I think most of you don't have to worry, because basically most of you, unless you're getting like a big contract from someone, you're not going to be anywhere near the £85,000 threshold. It's a pain that, for instance, ourselves, you know, we had a contract with the NHS, was it 3 years ago? And that meant we had to register for VAT, and now we have to be aware of adding stuff to VAT, for instance, any invoices that we do, unless we come under one of the exemptions. And again, this is what I'm saying is sometimes you might have to get a VAT specialist. You know that most of you probably your income raised from trading will be exempt, because it's going to fall into one of these one of these services like education and social welfare. So I've just put that up as a list. But as I said, most of you, it's not going to be an issue. But you need to ask yourself that question: if you're getting involved in trading, you know, what are the VAT implications for us or not? The other thing I was going to say was is you need to check your governing document. So look at your constitution or your articles of association. Very often there might be in the sort of powers bit of that says like no substantial permanent trading activities or no taxable permanent trading activity. That sort of phrase allows you to do the trading I've talked about. So it'll include you know, primary purpose trading, and as long as you stay below the small scale exemption, you're covered by it. The only time that it might be a bit unclear is if it says no trading, full stop. If you've got a catch-all phrase, though, such as any lawful activity to further the objects, then that will probably cover you anyway, even if you've got no trading in there. If you've got that other power, usually either the beginning or the end, any lawful activity, then you're fine. But if you haven't got any such clauses, it will be best to include one. And you just have to do it. It's not one you need to get Charity Commission approval from. So you could just do that at an AGM or an EGM without any prior permission from the Charity Commission, just to make sure that actually you're not going to fall foul from acting outside your governing document. And it is clear about, the objects are really, really important in terms of determining whether it's to be primary purpose, so you can do as much of it as you like, or whether it's to be non-primary purpose, and therefore you've got to do it within those exemptions, those financial limits. So it helps you clearly define whether it's going to be primary or non-primary purpose. And to be honest, it might be worthwhile changing your objects to make them more, so that actually you can get more of your trading to become primary purpose. E.g., like the childcare charity I gave, if it was under 5s and you want to work with 5 to 11s, well, then maybe say the charity is going to work with 0 to 11s, and therefore you can run your after school clubs or your holiday clubs as much as you like. It's not difficult. It's a bit bureaucratic to change your objects, and you need to get permission from the Charity Commission first, but as long as it's seen as a natural extension of the work that you do, and that your existing beneficiaries are not going to lose out from it, i.e. that you stop doing 0 to 5s work and just concentrate on the 5 to 11s, the Charity Commission might be a bit more wary about allowing you to do that. Whereas if you say, actually, we're going to carry on what we're doing with 0 to 5s, so they're going to carry on benefiting as they were before, but we're now going to bolt on 5 to 11, so it's additional, then there shouldn't be a problem. There is obviously risk involved, that sometimes trading means there's going to be some upfront costs. You might have to start employing staff and you've got no idea whether the money is going to come in or not, or you might buy in goods to sell on. Again, you've got no guarantee sometimes that they're going to be bought. So sometimes there might be a bit more financial risk. And basically you just need to be aware of that. And the Charity Commission expects trustees to have assessed that risk. So by having some sort of robust business plan to show actually that you will get enough of a return to cover the costs that you've laid out. And that's why sometimes some charities might set up a trading subsidiary. And there are 3 reasons for that. One is reducing the risk. The trading bit of the organisation goes down the tubes, it goes into debt. If it's then done directly by the charity, then actually the charity's assets could be at risk. And the Charity Commission wouldn't be very happy with that. And therefore, one way to reduce the risk is where you set up a totally separate identity, legal identity, like a trading company, that actually it runs the trading operation. If it goes bust, then basically, unless any creditors can say it was badly managed, knowingly badly managed, then they can whistle in the wind for money that they're owed. The other thing is about VAT liability. So I talked about that actually, once you go over 85 grand, you might then have to register for VAT. And again, that means that might affect the whole charity, and that might be disadvantageous. And therefore, sometimes some charities will set up a trading arm really just to make sure that the whole organisation doesn't become subject to VAT. And the other thing, of course, is that, generally I would say to charities, well, do your primary purpose trading under the small trading exemption, but if it grows and it goes beyond those limits, then you're going to need to set up a separate trading arm. And very often a trading subsidiary is owned by the charity. They appoint the directors, and that probably at the end of the year, once you've done your profit and loss, then any profits are then gift aided over to the charity, so it becomes a cash cow for the main charity. Downside, of course, then is that you will be running a totally separate organisation. It's going to have its own insurance, its own accounts, its own directors, its own staff, blah, 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 blah. And actually you also have to be very careful about the relationship between the charity and the trading arm, so that they are seen as separate organizations, but also importantly, the charity is not subsidizing the trading arm. Of course, there are whole things about selling, and this is the sort of things that you would see in something like a business plan, you know, being clear about this product or service, who's it for, who will pay for it, you know, your customer, doing marketing research, how will it develop your mission. That's an important question, I think, for charities. Sometimes they don't just want to do it to make money, but it's got to somehow perhaps reflect the mission that they have. What do we know about the need for the idea of the market? You know, your competitors, there's no, you know, great saying, well, actually this will sell, but actually if there are lots of other people out there doing it, then actually maybe it's going to take a lot of effort and money maybe to sell what you've got. So these are useful questions to be thought about if you are going to get into trading in a big way. You know, if you're just going to sell a couple of training course places, or you're selling teas and coffees and stuff like that, it doesn't really matter. But if it's going to become quite a big operation, then you might need to whack through these questions. Okay, well, I've done that. Let me have a look at the oh, someone's saying to leave. Oh yeah, someone's asked about who should be the directors of the trading company. So as I said, the trading arm is usually owned by the charity, and therefore the trustees quite often appoint those directors. But to deal with the conflict of interest, then you should have some of the directors can be trustees, but some should not. And there should be enough non-trustees to form a quorum for the trading arm. So let's say the quorum is 2. Then there should be at least 2 non-trustees as directors. That's the idea is so that actually those directors, if there is a conflict of interest between the trading company and the charity, that the trustees obviously then can step to one side and allow the 2 non-conflicted directors to make a clear decision. If you look at the guidance on the Charity Commission, they say there should be at least 1 director of the trading arm who's not a trustee, and 1 trustee who is not a director of the trading arm. But I would go a bit further and say it needs to be the quorum, whatever the quorum is in the articles of the trading arm. Okay, so if you offer something for sale, let's say, but it was pay what you feel. I think the examples that I gave, it depends on, I guess, the clear messaging that you're giving to people. You know, there's this thing about actually there might be a strong expectation that you've got to pay 25 quid as opposed to pay what you feel. So I would say probably doing something like a suggested payment of, because I think if you enter into a negotiation of then, okay, well, you know, I've only got 15 quid, 20 quid. Well, then you're selling at a discount. Did you see what I'm saying? It's blurry. Are you selling it at a discount, or are you accepting a donation? And it's going to be clear, I think, about your messaging, and put yourself in the shoes of the person who's going to give the 25 quid. What do they feel you are asking them to do? If you think about it, it's not very usual in the UK, but obviously in some countries, you know, haggling is a part of trade. You know, you might see go to some countries and you never ever pay the ticket price or the first amount that the salesperson has said this is going to cost. You know, you enter into a negotiation, but it's still going to be a trade at the end of the day. So I think you have to be clear about your messaging. How is charging a membership fee? Well, as long as the membership fee does not provide a service, and there are some complicated formulas to be used. So if the membership fee basically just gives someone access to a vote at the AGM, or even access to your events and activities, that's probably okay. But if it gives them a reduced rate, then actually it will be counted as trading, because basically they're buying it. Unless, if anybody remembers that long list of exemptions, one of them was around actually entrance fees to museums and art galleries and institutions like that. For instance, membership of the National Trust is not counted as trading, because it comes under that exemption, that actually you pay your, what is it, £80 a week, a year, and that gives you free entry to all their properties and parking. So that's not that's treated as primary purpose trading. But if it was something for a luncheon club, then you'd have to be careful about whether that was to give them free use of the luncheon club over a year. Okay. Do people want to ask any questions at this point? So anybody want to come back to me about my explanations?
Hi, Steve.
Yeah.
Is it possible to go back on your slides to those exemptions you were talking about just now on the trading? Okay, is it possible for one to kind of over trump the other? Non-primary trading. So
yeah,
I was trying to think of an example when you were I think it might have been the next slide. So community centre offering the cafe, I think the exemptions were on the next slide. Yeah, so that was it. With the 50%.
Yeah, of the beneficiaries running.
Yeah. So if you've got a cafe and it's mainly run by volunteers, then that's 50% of your beneficiary.
No, not unless the volunteers are your beneficiaries. Okay, so
right.
So you have to be clear who your charity is set up to support. Like in your example, you know, yours is about improving the quality of life for social welfare of the residents of the local community. So if it's them, but if they were volunteers from outside the local community, then you would say they're not your beneficiaries. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you've got the volunteers that are your beneficiaries as well.
Yeah.
That right. Okay.
That's fine. So what it is, it's the definition is they have to be beneficiaries, whether they're paid staff or whether they're volunteers.
Yeah.
Or whether they're clients or users, you know.
Yeah.
So for instance, yeah, so I guess safe and sound, so your beneficiaries would be the women that you that you support. So as long as any cafe or facility was being staffed by at least 50% of the women that you would be working and supporting, then you'd be covered by that exemption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that.
Anyone else? No? Okay. I've got to give you short time to have a go at to do a short evaluation online before I close up with final comments. Sorry, I thought this was open. Okay, in the chat, I'm going to put a URL. If you could quickly do that online, a survey, does it come up for everyone? Has everyone done that? Yeah. Great, thank you. It's very helpful for us because that's obviously our own feedback to help improve the services we give, but also importantly, no, just as not equally importantly is obviously reporting to our funders, particularly BCP Council and the NHS, so that we can carry on doing this stuff for you. Okay, so quickly just to wrap up. So I think some key points are, which is actually you all knew about anyway, is that charities can trade. I think importantly it's a remembering that it's wherever there is an exchange, you know, that you can have this as long as you give me that, and there is an exchange of something. Accountants call it a consideration, which might not be money. It's just that money is the easiest way to regulate it and legislate for. That's why, for instance, in the part let schemes have always really puzzled HMRC about actually how they try and regulate that. But there we go. but there are two things you need to do. Is that you need to check your governing document just to make sure there isn't an absolute prescription against trading. Very, very unusual if there was, but you might want to maybe just review your objects, or make sure that actually there is wording in there about taxable trading. As I said, you can do it's unlimited if it helps you deliver on your objects, but there is exemptions within the rules, and usually most of you will use a small trading exemption, which can be up to 80,000 a year if you're a larger charity. But just be careful and be aware of that. Although, as I said before, I think for most of you, it's not consequential at all, because you're going to be doing nowhere near 85 grand. As I said, I think the problem might come for you if you start to have contracts for some of your delivery. And that's going to be from the NHS and increasingly local authorities. Local authorities very often now give contracts rather than grants. And that maybe you should do a bit of a business plan, even if it's on the back of a fag packet type stuff, to be clear about actually your trading idea and how you're going to market it. And I guess the one thing I would say is that actually trading is a separate set of skills from raising money from grants and donations. And therefore you might need to look at the skills within your organization so you can do a successful trading business idea. Help and support, well, I've already said you can come back to us with initial ideas, but if we think it's too complicated for us to answer, then we'll signpost you on. There is Charity Commission guidance for trustees and trading, but it's good for anyone within the organisation, basically unpicking what you can and cannot do and how to do it. There also is this bit of from HMRC, which they wrote with the Charity Commission as well, called Charities and Trading. If you've never come across Sayer Vincent and their Made Simple guides, really, really good. Sayer Vincent are probably the best known national accountancy firm that only deals with not-for-profits. So they totally understand what it is to be a charity. And they have a whole lot of Made Simple guides, usually about 8 to 10 pages long, which quite simply set out the law and do's and don'ts. But these two ones are relevant to what I've done today. And NCVO, although it's quite old, it's a very good book. It talks about not only the sort of legal stuff, but I think the whole thing around actually how to do a good trading idea, the sort of business side approach to it, the marketing that you might need to do, the whole issues of pricing and costing. Okay, so that's the end of the webinar. Sometime next week, you'll get an email from Chris, who you've had correspondence up to now from, which will include this presentation. So you'll get the hyperlinks I've just shown you, for instance, and a link to the recording of the webinar. And
sorry, Chris. Sorry, Steve. I asked one last question.
Oh, did you? Oh, right.
Can you just have a look? It's just the
the chat.
gift aid. It's in the chat.
Okay.
It's about gift aid. It's like if
you're trading within your charity objects, can you claim gift aid from your money received through? No. So gift aid is only on donations. So what you see in some charity shops, you see the gift aid bit, that's because they're using a gift aid through donated. So it's complicated. So what happens is that rather than that person goes into the charity shop, dumps their bag of clothes, goes away, which is the traditional and main way that charity shops work, that's fine. But what they can do is that they can get you to sell it on their behalf. And then they claim gift aid on that. You claim gift aid on top of what the sale is. So if you sell the item for £2 and they've done the gift aid forms, and there are various forms that HMRC say you need to get the donor to sign, then you can claim the 25p on top of, sorry, the 50p on top of it. the 25%.
When you sell the item.
When you sell the item, yes. So, but it has to be, but it also, if you look at it, it has to be clearly have that on the label, you know, for the person buying it in the charity shop, so they know it's a gift aided item as well.
There's quite a lot of work to it because you have
Yes.
to do returns and
Yeah.
then they get the money.
Yeah.
So it's quite in depth, and if you're just selling, it may not be worth
No.
the 25p you're
Yeah.
going to get out of it.
Yeah.
So trading, I mean, I was only just thinking, because of what you said, that our cafe would probably come under charity purposes.
Yeah.
So, but that means that everything that goes through the cafe couldn't be gift aided at all. No.
Like what would go through the cafe?
When we sell a cup of coffee or something, and we get
no, because it's a trade.
That's not.
No, it's a trade. It's a trade.
Okay.
Yeah, if you were doing them all as donations, you just had like a cup of coffee and there's a pot there to put people money in, then you could get gift aid, but have to use the gift aid small donation scheme. You know, which you have to do for any for gift aid that you get back on any sort of like, you know, tins that you have, fundraising tins. But then obviously there are rules around that, and it depends on how much you're doing of main gift aid, how much you can claim. So no, so you couldn't, if it's a straight sale, you can't gift that, you can't ask people to gift aid the amount. But if it's a donation, you would think about it, but then you have to do the whole stuff either around the main gift aid scheme or the gift aid small donation scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. Any more for any more? Right. Okay. Great. Well, thanks very much, and have a good day and weekend.
Thank you, and you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Okay. Bye.